This story takes place in the Wild West, between two legends, Cowboys and Indians. Near the border of Texas and Oklahoma, in a small town named Alusty, we take aim at these stereotypes. There really is nothing here. It's really impressive. Oklahoma, an overview. In the 1920s, Oklahoma was the oil capital of the world, and since statehood has historically been majority white. However, the state was built up on the subjugation of Native Americans and shouldn't even exist. Native American sovereignty was the entire eastern half of Oklahoma. Legally, Indian territory was to belong to the tribal nations forever, and trespass by settlers was forbidden. But between 1830 and modern day, Congress would violate every one of the 375 treaties it made with Native American tribes, as well as numerous statutory acts. From 1830 to 1907, the 5 tribes lost all of their sovereignty to Oklahoma State, which denied they ever had a reservation there. This was only recently challenged in the 2020 landmark Supreme Court case
1895-26, McGirt versus Oklahoma.
Today, Oklahoma is home to 39 Native American tribes, largely a part of forced migration and the Trail of Tears. The concentration of natives in Oklahoma is the highest in the country. Every 1 in 12 residents of Oklahoma is native. It still remains a majority white Republican region. In fact, the modern conflict between Native American tradition and modern America is only a small part of an ongoing problem of assimilation facing Native Americans since the 1880s, and it takes place in the context of past transgressions against them. Several to consider include cultural genocide, forced adoption, forced integration through adoption processes and boarding schools, forced migrations and land grabs through broken promises and anti-Native American policies that were aimed to kill the Indian, save the man. In other words, to absorb and assimilate them. I was driving 9 hours from Texas to Oklahoma, and the entire time, I listened to a podcast called This Land.
You're listening to This Land, a podcast about broken promises, tribal land, and murder.
Created and hosted by Rebecca Nagel,
of
a Cherokee as well as a journalist. I was driving the 9 hours there to face my own misconceptions about being Native American and modern America, and listening to the podcast helped me confirm 2 notions. Number 1, that Native Americans are largely ignored in modern America and are even considered dead. And secondly, that the modern American struggle isn't over, and that the past transgressions against them aren't forgiven.
One time, I was at this social justice conference, and a white woman walked up to me and said, "I thought we killed all of you." She said it as if she was just making conversation. The cruel irony of being Native American in 2019 is we survived genocide only to be treated as if we're invisible.
What the podcast didn't teach me is how diverse Native American tribes really are. In their history, culture, and traditions, they're completely different. And the other thing it didn't teach me is how deep the distrust runs, not just between them and whites, but also among their own communities. And I first realized this might be a problem when the Choctaw Nation absolutely forbade me to interview their tribal members. When I was talking off camera to other people about the Cherokee, they also referred to them as one of the 5 civilized tribes, and seemed to suggest that they had already lost their tradition and culture. But I'm sure the Cherokee would disagree. I'm explaining all this because I want to make it clear that I am not an expert. I've never studied these tribes or their specific histories, and my questions were not specifically tailored to them. What I was trying to do was just go tribe to tribe and start a conversation, because what they all share is a history of broken promises, and I wanted to hear how they reconcile that with their place in modern America. So what about the modern cowboys?
Cowboys.
The white settlers?
White men.
Small town America?
More white men.
What does modern life look like for them? To answer this question, I traveled to Alusty, Oklahoma, and stayed with Jeff,
Topczweski,
Originally from New York, now in Lusty, Oklahoma.
The day after I arrived, Jeff gave me and Emily a tour. I'll introduce Emily in just a minute. It took about 5 minutes to drive from one side of Lusty to the other. He showed us the 4 different churches, the affordable housing projects.
Housing projects called Eagle Heights. They are very cheap. You can buy a whole 3-bedroom house for $326 a month.
The post office.
To the post office.
And he was really proud of the library he built,
The library there. We've emptied the books out of there. My people have done.
as well as the weight room he helped construct.
They have a little weight room in here that kids can practice lifting weights. I wired up the lights in there and everything for them. Well, the baseball coach and his wife, who's a school teacher, live in this house here practically on the field.
Yeah, I see that. Wow.
He's a very good baseball player. I want him to take you to talk to him. He's also an Indian.
Ah.
That's Eagle Fixico.
I actually did end up meeting Little Eagle at the local school.
How you doing? Eagle. My name's Van, Little Eagle Fixico. I'm a Creek and Chehalis Native American, and I'm actually 1/3 Irish. I grew up on the Chehalis Reservation in Washington State. I was very connected to my culture when I was in Washington State on the reservation.
But we'll get back to him later. After the tour, Jeff took us to the town hall to talk to the county clerk, Kim. Kim referred us to the local policeman.
They just have some questions for you about what it's like living here, and they wanted kind of, since you are a police officer, they kind of wanted your opinion.
The only policeman, Joe.
Hi, Joe.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing, I guess. Y'all hanging out with Jeff?
Yeah. Ended up here, and where we've been.
In addition, Jeff and his family invited us to sit down and have breakfast with him every morning, at 7 a.m. to be exact. I really had to get my shit together to be awake and ready to pose introspective questions on national identity and rural values at 7 a.m. I mean, just look at me.
It's 6:38 in the morning. In 15 minutes, I have coffee with a German lady and an interview. So that's the goal.
Okay.
How long have you been doing coffee here in the mornings?
21 years.
Oh, wow.
It's been a long time. Yeah, it's been a long time.
A Lusty was my only insight into small-town America. Luckily, it wasn't Emily's only example.
While I'm on the road, I hit typically the largest city in every state and then between 2 to 3 small towns typically. So I've seen a wide breadth of America so far. I've covered about half of the Midwest, all of the East, about a third of the South, and now I'm working my way west.
Emily Topczweski is a journalist I met along the way. She just happened to be staying in Lusty at exactly the same time and in exactly the same place as me.
Essentially, I'm working on a project that is exploring the idea that we are more alike than we are different. So I'm exploring these ideas of identity and community, how they form, and what we value and how that impacts how we vote. So of course I learned a lot from her. We traded notes and anecdotal evidence about technique and about our findings. She really was a well of information. This is what I learned. These small town communities like Lusty are held alive by thin lifelines. For example, the determination of their residents to keep the town alive.
It's your concern if you want to live in a decent town.
Why don't you get the good citizens of the town to help you out?
When I started working here, I wanted to make a difference in the town. I wanted it to be like you see on TV, you know, where you watch where everybody is having community events and dances and, you know, beautiful parks and gazebos. And working here, I've applied for grants, and we got our park fixed up. We got a walking area. We got playground equipment. We just recently got awnings. We got a gazebo, because I feel like every town should have a gazebo.
Well, it sounds like you definitely are making a difference then.
I would like to see more people move in. I'd like to see all of the substandard housing renovated. I'd like to see some better opportunities for employment. This could be a nice suburb of the Altus area.
Are you mostly focused on like not preserving but like improving the community?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we need something here. I got permission to clean out that house that I'm gonna buy. And you're gonna bring me a dumpster maybe?
I think they have already taken it.
It's already there?
Maybe.
Okay, well that's pretty good. Well,
I didn't do it, but the trash guy might take it.
that's good, because I'm gonna just work them a little bit. They're couch surfers. I take in people that are traveling across the country, both Americans and people from overseas.
This place is also a workaway camp, but I'm not really equipped to be working in the dirt.
I have some workaway kids, students that come here, and in exchange for room and board and some sightseeing, they do some labor for me, some painting and stuff, and help me maintain the buildings and grounds here.
Because the couchsurfing home that Jeff offered was also a workaway camp, even I was asked to help pitch in to maintain the community.
You got a job?
Despite their efforts, the town was still in decline, especially when considering how it was 50 years ago, as told by Helen.
It used to be what you'd call a thriving town. It had little stores. It had 2 gas stations, 1 cafe that I can think of. It might have had more, but back then I didn't go to them. And it had a little store. Used to be a grocery store, and in the 70s when I was here, they had converted it into a whole bunch of sewing machines, and it was a sewing factory. Just, probably had 10 sewing machines in there, and they employed 10 people. And she made pantsuits back then. Those polyester pantsuits were the thing. So she was making those, but it didn't last long.
Like I said, Old Lusty doesn't offer jobs. There's no jobs. The 2 guys that we got working across the street, me, 2 in there.
Yeah, that's what.
And then they got the
saying.
pit stop down there and the post office, and that's the only place besides farm work. That's the only jobs here.
And
that's why everybody drives to Altus or wherever to work.
What was really keeping the town alive was the school.
Once you lose the school, you have nothing keeping families here. And that's the only thing holding families in a town like this, because there are jobs. When you have to travel 20 miles, without a school, what's keeping them to live 20 miles away? Nothing.
So if residents had so few possibilities to rise above the cycle of poverty, why did they stay?
I think this town is a decent enough place for us to live in.
So what would you say is kind of the biggest draw to why you stayed?
Why I stayed?
Yeah, coming from the city.
What keeps me here?
It's peaceful, it's quiet. I don't worry about my kids getting ran over or kidnapped.
Nice quiet place.
Not that this is a huge problem in the bigger cities, but you can't let your kids just run around like you can here,
It's a low cost of living place to live. I have friends from the town here now. I have some relatives here. I have a house. I have a couple of cars. It's a good place to live.
It's a community focused area. If people need food, we know that they're struggling. They get together and they'll take them food. So, and that's what I love about small town, or this small town, is the people. The people are awesome.
It's incredible. Out here it was like, I've landed in heaven and I'm still alive. It was cowboys and like freedom and open spaces. And
the rest of the people out here have no interest in people from other countries.
Really?
None whatsoever. I have a different mentality than people out here. I'm from New York. I'm used to have people from more diverse backgrounds. Even on my block in New York, we have a lot of Indian people. We had Germans, Irish, Italian, Greeks. Much different than out here. Everybody out here is homogeneous. They're either white or Mexican descent. They think that this is the golden land, that there's nothing better.
Do you agree?
They're right.
Misconceptions about people here. They ask them if they have things in their country like refrigerators or subways or buses or things, and they're shocked to find out that people from at least Western Europe have all the modern conveniences and maybe better ones.
We have such terrible taxes.
Where?
Western Europe. Taxes are huge and the control is huge. I don't want to be controlled.
What control is there?
Versus here with lower taxes, there's a lot less of that oversight, but that also means that you have communities that are struggling. Older communities, you read it in the news, I see it in my travels. There are lots of people who are your age who are working part-time jobs because they can't afford their prescriptions. That's a huge problem in the US that they don't have.
If you really had the choice, like between being safe and being free, which one
would
would
rather be free.
Really? Is that common?
No, because most people are all on welfare and got their hand out. Gimme, gimme.
Did you grow up then in New York as well?
I grew up in Queens.
Okay.
You know what that is? Okay. I lived in a 6-story apartment house.
Oh my
There
gosh.
was a 6-story apartment house across the street and next to us and down the block. And then right on that side there was a strip of stores, little stores.
This could not be more different then.
I know. That's what I
Absolutely.
just love. I told everybody at the time, and I've always said it since, I've gone 100 years back in time. It was like coming to a time machine.
People always talk about fundamental mentality differences between the North and the South, but I would argue that your larger identity and mentality difference is between rural and urban areas. And that is the same no matter what part of the country you're in.
My impression, both in the cities, in New York City and Brooklyn and out here in Olustee, the same thing has happened. We used to have a lot of factories when I was in my teens and 20s. There were a lot of job opportunities for low and unskilled people in factories. And all the factories moved out of New York and Brooklyn, and just the same thing out here. And there's no starting jobs.
4 years ago, we had better finances, but times are getting hard. You know, 4 years ago, I had another officer working. Now we don't have it now.
And how have times gotten hard? Is that something you've seen through this whole area?
Oh yes,
Is it like an
it's everywhere.
economic slowdown?
Well, we went through a recession. What, 6 years ago?
Yeah, and you're still feeling the repercussions of that. Has it been that way since you've lived here, since 2006?
Oh yeah, there's no businesses here. We don't have a gas station here. We have to drive to Altus to get gas, or El Dorado's got a gas station, but our store decided not to put it in. He used to have it. When the new owner took over, he said no.
Do you think that hurts this community?
Yep. Yeah, because those tax dollars that could be made off of that we'd get tax money here.
Yeah, that could be huge, especially for you not having to drive that far.
Right.
And then you could just fill up, and then you're immediately generating stuff back.
But yeah, it'd be nice if we had some businesses here. And Kim's working at trying to get some.
If you could change anything about this town, what would you change?
I would bring in gas. That's the main thing that I would do.
What was even more concerning is that from what Emily told me, this problem, this division between rural and urban, was a common occurrence that was happening all across the United States.
In these small towns, what I hear all the time is we're the backbone of America. Without us, the cities wouldn't survive, they wouldn't exist. And there's this immense frustration that they're not getting the support and recognition they deserve or feel they deserve to survive. And these towns are drying up. And I think that, for me, is one of the biggest pointed differences when you talk about rural versus urban, because urban America doesn't think about it. If you go and do interviews in a city, they're not going to talk to you about how small towns are dying or concerned about jobs or whatever, because it's so far from their reality. And I think that frustration and that disparity is kind of what, as a country, you're grappling with, because how do you support both? Or can you? The mentality is that they're being left behind. And you can see it and you can recognize it even as an outsider, and you can feel for them like deeply, because they are. You can't deny it, and I don't even think that's really a biased thing to say, because you could just look at it. Economically, they're struggling. They're struggling to get people to move to small towns or to visit small towns, to keep them in small towns.
You speak well for a white woman.
So rural communities are feeling more and more disenfranchised from modern America and increasingly like a minority. But on the other hand, they don't seem to be willing to change anything, like offering support systems or changing their way of life.
For someone who's trying to live like a white man, you're sure turning out to be one hell of a Comanche.
Hey! Indians! They're riding this way! Comanche! A whole tribe of them!
The white man is following. But he must turn back. Turn back.
But he must turn back.
Back.
The Indian, legendary and mysterious, wrapped in a cloak of mystery. Wrapped in a cloak of mystery, the Indian territory.
Died of white man's disease. The white man. White man has strangled the Indian with words.
We're lost in a white world.
They have white man sickness.
Bunch of savages! Savages! Savages!
You are an Indian lover. Indian lover. Lover.
I'm sorry for what I said about you being a Comanche.
I tried to set up proper interviews with different tribes months in advance. That includes the Cherokee, Rebecca Nagler specifically, and the Choctaw Nation, but all of these attempts had failed. That's how I ended up just meandering from tribe to tribe. I've just entered the Muskogee Creek Nation. Yes, I was wondering, I wanted to come by the Cultural Center today because I'm doing interviews about, sort of what it means to be Native American, misconceptions, national identity, that sort of thing. I was wondering if anybody would want to talk today, or if you happen to have time.
So on that one, we actually we have policies in place.
Right.
Or that we have to get special permissions for things like that.
Mm-hmm.
No, sir. We are not allowed to do any kind of interviews or anything like that without first speaking with, our multimedia department as well as some of the other entities within our nation.
Really? May I ask what the fear is, or why is that such a? Why is there so much security?
Can't really comment on that. Can't really comment on that. That's just something that you would have to speak to them about.
I was curious about how they saw themselves in a system that had so consistently oppressed them. And I was curious why high schoolers like me had never learned about their modern situation. How much has assimilation impacted them? What is their modern situation? These are questions that I never got answered in school, and it was something that I was curious to see. I wanted all of these questions answered, but one email kept coming back to mind. When people outside of our community try to tell our story, it does more damage to our people than it helps. and I absolutely didn't want that.
You're the trouble, mister.
So I decided to let community members speak for themselves, but first I had to find a tribe that was willing to talk to me. Once again, a stroke of luck helped me do exactly that, when I visited the Comanche Museum and managed to talk to Fred from the gift shop.
Okay, it's Fred Cody now. I'm a Comanche Nation tribal member. I work here at the Comanche Nation gift shop.
Anyway, nice guy, he helped direct me right to the Comanche Cultural Center, and that's where I met several chiefs, members, and college grads that were willing to talk to me.
My name is Lowell Nibbs. I'm from Lawton, Oklahoma. I am half Comanche and half Cheyenne.
My name is Fiona Kirchie. I am 32 years old and of the Comanche Nation.
My name is Randy Lewis Howe, Sr., and I am a Dakota, Sioux, and Comanche.
Ever since the Comanches were forced onto the reservation in Oklahoma.
You know, they call this area the KCA, Kiowa Comanche Apache Reservation, but it's not like a typical reservation as you'd find up north in North Dakota or South Dakota, where it's a closed off area more or less, and it's just the people there. Here it's mixed. They do call it a reservation, but it's very different because, you know, it's not just Indians that live on this reservation. You know, it's everyone. It's not just tribal business, you know, it's businesses of all kinds. So it's a little odd when they call it a reservation in my mind versus what you would see up north.
Most time reservations have little towns with a little gas station, houses, and school, and that's about it.
There's a lot of suicide on the reservations. Depression, methamphetamine, very bad. And the modern world, that's easy to get caught up in.
The fact is, we were raised neither Comanche nor white.
As a Native American, you know, we have to try to balance, like I said, balance modern life and our traditional life.
Money in the modern world runs everything. You know, your bills, you know, you got all that stuff that's going on. So you have to adjust to that. And Comanches help you get on your feet to try to go into the modern world and everything, versus you go onto the reservation, there ain't really no jobs there or anything like that.
So here, where it's open, it's much better. The economy is better. There's more opportunities for the Comanche Nation financially, enterprises, when it's open like this, versus up in a traditional reservation. There aren't that many opportunities, business-wise, educational-wise.
A lot of towns up there, they would say that the natives up there are a nuisance. And you see it a lot on social media, a lot of them complaining about the reservations, that they should get jobs, and they should pay like us, pay taxes like us, they should do this and that. When really, you know, we were put there. We didn't pick, you know, we didn't choose to go to the reservations. Like, we were forced to go there. We were forced religion. We were forced not to speak our native language. You know, there's a lot of stuff that happened to us, and then people are just like, they should act like this and that. Well, you know, it's no wonder why a lot of them are depressed on the reservation. A lot of our stuff got taken. A lot of our traditions were almost annihilated.
A lot of the natives nowadays, I think they harbor some type of animosity, I guess I could say, towards the European cultures, and I really don't think they know why. I was lucky to get out of that when I got off the reservation and went to a public school, and, you know, went to college, and, you know, kind of more American now. I'm not as in touch with my culture anymore. I still occasionally go to a powwow, and I, you know, hear songs. I still know a few songs in Native American. I don't speak it very well. I have more of a working knowledge.
How it was, like, we didn't need money back then, you know. We were just tradition, you know, just traditional.
I love doing what I do. I love learning my culture, I love trying to revitalize our language and learn our language more and more. I love our entertainment that we do. You know, we have our stick game, our hand game, and I love playing those. I love doing that. So it's exhausting, yes, and it's like we're always on the go, but it's something that I love, and I know other people love that as well. That's why they continue to do that. And as we go further and further, I think when we start losing our language more is when our identity goes away more.
Sovereignty is the foundation for Native rights.
Natives retain sovereignty on their land. Among other things, this means that they can set their own gambling laws. As a result, casinos and other gambling halls have become a staple of Native American communities. The casinos are an attempt to achieve economic independence, but it also presents an image problem as well as a problem of values, to Natives and to surrounding communities. It's safe to say that gambling remains a contentious point.
The advent of casinos has changed a lot of things. It's more or less all about the money, and that's not the way. That's not why we dance. That's not why we sing. But our younger people, that's all they see. The younger generation is losing interest in, say, our culture, our language, and I see it all the time. They want today's modern conveniences and have no desire to, as we're playing hand game here today, they have no desire to do that or to attend a powwow and learn what's going on there. It's sad because in a few generations there are going to be so few that know, of the younger generation of what's going on and trying to preserve our culture.
A lot of our people who are older are afraid of change.
Does it feel like Native American culture is afraid of evolution?
They are. They really are. And as our younger people come up and more Native Americans are going to colleges and universities and getting degrees, so, a lot of them want to come back to their tribes to help better and try to prosper our tribes.
Occasionally in today's world, they are kind of held back by maybe being a little too traditional. And I'm not saying we should lose our traditions. That's one of the things that make us strong.
What I can do for our people is try my best to hold on and show people and tell them about the Comanche culture.
And I'm 33 and I'm just now learning our language. That's how we're trying to bring our language back.
Talks like the white man he thinks he is. He's afraid to be Comanche.
Comanche! Before talking about being Native American, you need to understand the concept of blood quantum. On its most basic level, it's proof of how much of your blood is indigenous. It means that natives are classified by blood.
Since the early 1900s, the federal government has tracked the degree of Indian blood of every citizen of every tribe.
The degree of blood qualifies natives for certain benefits, including tax breaks and allotment. These are still very much relevant to Native identity today. Natives with a proper blood degree are federally recognized and carry unique federal ID.
Recently, I read somewhere that there are tribes that their bloodline is so low and so thin that they don't even go by blood quantum anymore. As long as you can trace your descendancies, you can be on that roll. As to we're here, you have to have a certain degree of blood to be on our roll. The first people that were put on them tribes were like, you're full-blooded Comanches or you're full-blooded this. And then as the years went on and they married, they might have had kids and it just trickled down, And that's just how it is. I think eventually it's going to be to where there's going to be no minimum or maximum.
That's another thing that bothers me. Why doesn't any other race have a CDIB or something showing that how much American are you in German, right? Versus like an African American. How come they don't have cards that show their blood quantity? We're the only ones that have them, Native Americans. Next to dogs and horses to show what kind of Indian are you and how much of the Indian are you.
So, if being Native shouldn't be defined by blood, then what is being Native American?
What it means to be Native American. I think a lot of us still feel a strong sense of belonging to nature and the land and, you know, our people. I think it's kind of tribalism. Some people might even say it's racism, but we still feel a strength with one another. We've had to adopt certain other cultures to obviously survive now in America today. It's not like it, you know, was a couple hundred years ago. But you'll see more and more of us natives, I guess, being mainstreamed.
To me, it's representing the people in the best way you know how. All tribes are different in the way they do things, how they carry themselves, how they dress in regalia. They're all different. But you know, I remember what my grandparents told me, that Comanche people are humble people. They don't stand out. They're always together. They're not looking to be in the forefront, but they stay together and they pray together and they try to preserve their cultures together. I've taught my kids, I've got a boy and a girl, as much as I could them growing up, and they've caught on, and they participate in their culture now, and they're teaching their grandkids. But that's kind of unusual. A lot of them, like I said, don't do that. So, you know, you want them to go to school and get a good job, have a nice house, but still your culture is there. You want to maintain that. So, because if these generations don't, there'll be a time when nobody knows. And when you lose your culture, you lose your identity as a people.
Even more than an identity question, natives are constantly posed a question of survival. None of the natives I talked to thought a reservation was beneficial. They talked often about a cycle of poverty and addiction on the res. McGirt v. Oklahoma has the potential to restore Oklahoma to native territories, but it remains a question in my mind if the tribes even want that.
You've heard my words.
So on one side, the rugged rural communities are struggling not to be forgotten, and on the other, Native Americans have been living that struggle for generations. The struggle between their proud heritage and living by the modern rules.